My brothers had the pen hovering over the nursing home admission papers, practically drooling at the thought of splitting Mom's estate the moment she was locked away. They thought they had secured the ultimate payday, but they didn't know I had been silently moving every single penny out of their reach for years. The fluorescent lights of the administrative office at Golden Horizon Care Center hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. The air smelled of industrial cleaner, masking the faint, underlying scent of urine and boiled cabbage. It was a miserable place. The walls were a peeling beige, the carpet was worn thin, and the screams of confused residents echoed down the hallway outside the closed door. Gary, my oldest brother, tapped the cheap ballpoint pen against the desk, his knee bouncing with impatient energy. Stephen, the middle child, sat with his arms crossed, feigning a look of somber concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. Across from us sat Mrs. Gable, the facility administrator, who looked tired of dealing with families like ours. "Just sign right there, Brenda," Gary said, nudging the clipboard toward me. "It's for the best. Mom needs professional help. We can't provide that." "We're doing this out of love," Stephen added, his voice dripping with synthetic syrup. "We need to preserve her assets for her care, but we can't drain the accounts on in-home nurses. This is the most fiscal option." I looked at the paper. It was an admission form that would surrender our mother, Eleanor, to this state-funded warehouse for the elderly. Once she was in here, the plan Gary and Stephen had concocted over beers while I was changing Mom's adult diapers, was to sell her house, liquidate her stocks, and split the proceeds 3 ways for safekeeping. They looked at me, the little sister, the pushover, the one who never married and stayed home to take care of Mom. They saw a doormat. They didn't see the grenade I was holding. To understand how we got to this sterile room with the buzzing lights, you have to understand the Patterson family dynamic. It's a tale as old as time, but with a multi-million-dollar twist. Our father died when I was 12. He was a hard man, a steel worker, but he instilled a Depression-era fear of poverty in my mother. Mom was a librarian. She didn't make much money on paper, but she was a wizard with finances. She lived frugally. We wore hand-me-downs, ate casseroles for a week straight, and never went on vacations further than the local campground. Gary and Stephen hated it. As soon as they turned 18, they bolted. Gary went into sales, chasing get-rich-quick schemes that usually ended with him asking Mom for a bridge loan. Stephen became a real estate agent who was always one deal away from the big time, yet somehow always needed help with his car payments. I stayed, not because I was trapped, but because I actually liked Mom. We were best friends. When I got my degree in finance, I didn't run off to Wall Street. I set up a small remote consulting business and stayed in the guest house on the property. Over the last 20 years, while Gary and Stephen were busy buying leased BMWs and marrying women who expected a certain lifestyle, Mom and I were quietly building an empire. See, the brothers thought Mom was just comfortable. They knew she had the house, a sprawling Victorian on 4 acres that Dad had bought for pennies in the 70s, now worth a fortune due to urban sprawl. They assumed she had a life insurance policy and maybe a modest savings account. They had no idea about the portfolio. Mom had started investing in the early 80s. She bought into companies nobody cared about back then: tech stocks, pharmaceuticals, energy. She reinvested every dividend. She never touched the principal. When her mind started to slip 3 years ago, she handed the reins to me entirely. I managed it aggressively. By the time Mom's dementia began to truly manifest, the modest savings Gary and Stephen fantasized about was actually a diversified portfolio worth just over $4 million, plus the house, which was appraised at another $1.5 million. But we kept it quiet. Mom always said, "Money talks, wealth whispers, and greed screams."
The screaming started 6 months ago. Mom had a fall. It wasn't major, just a slip in the kitchen, but it was the catalyst. Her cognitive decline accelerated. She started forgetting names, leaving the stove on, wandering into the garden at night looking for Dad. I became her full-time caregiver. I bathed her, fed her, managed her medication, and played her favorite records. It was exhausting, heartbreaking work, but I did it because I loved her. Derry and Stephen visited exactly twice in those 6 months. The first time was Christmas. Gary brought his wife, Linda, who spent the entire time looking at the antique furniture and Googling hallmarks on the silverware. Stephen complained that the house smelled like old people and asked Mom if she still had her checkbook handy because he was a little short on his mortgage. The second time was 3 weeks ago, after Mom had a bad day where she didn't recognize me. I had called them in tears, looking for emotional support. "She's losing it, Brenda," Gary had said over the phone, not sounding sad, but calculating. "It's probably time we look at options." "Options?" I had asked, wiping my eyes. "She's happy here. I can handle it. I just need to vent." No, Stephen chimed in on the conference call. "You can't be selfish, Brenda. She needs 24-hour professional oversight. And honestly, sitting on that property is a waste. If we sell now, we can ensure she has the best care." The best care turned out to be Golden Horizon. I did the research. Golden Horizon had a 2-star rating. They had been cited for health code violations 3 times in the last 5 years. It was the cheapest facility in the county. "Why this one?" I had asked them during a family meeting they convened at a steakhouse, which they put on my credit card. "It's cost-effective," Gary said, cutting into a ribeye. "Look, Brenda, Mom's assets aren't infinite. If we hire private nurses, that money burns up in a few years. If we put her in Golden Horizon, Medicaid can eventually kick in, and we can preserve the estate." "Preserve the estate for who?" I asked, staring him down. "For the family," Stephen said, acting offended. "For her legacy. Look, we've already drawn up the paperwork. We have power of attorney ready to go. Mom signed it years ago, remember?" They were referring to a document Mom had signed 10 years ago, naming the 3 of us as joint agents. They thought it gave them the power to overrule me if they voted 2-1. They were getting ready to cash out. They had already contacted a realtor. Gary had mentioned buying a boat. Stephen was looking at vacation condos in Florida. They were spending the money before the body was even cold, and Mom was very much alive. That night, after the steakhouse dinner, I went home and sat by Mom's bed. She was having a lucid moment. She looked small under the quilt, her gray hair fanned out on the pillow. "They want to put me away, don't they?" she whispered. My heart broke. "They're talking about it, Mom." She reached out a trembling hand and took mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "They never came around, Brenda, only when they wanted something. Gary took $10,000 for a business that didn't exist. Stephen stole my jewelry to pay a gambling debt in '98. I nodded. I knew all of it. "Don't let them have it, Brenda," she said, her eyes suddenly sharp, filled with the iron will of the woman who raised me. "The house, the money, none of it. They'll blow it in a year and leave you with nothing." "I don't care about the money, Mom. I just want you safe." "I know," she smiled. "That's why you're the only one who deserves it. But I don't want you to just have it. I want you to use it to punish them." It was a dark thought, but Mom had a vindictive streak when it came to injustice. She pointed to the safe in the closet. "Get the red folder. Call Mr. Sterling." Mr. Sterling was our estate attorney. He was an old shark who had been managing the family trust since the '80s. The brothers thought he was senile or dead. He was neither. The next morning, while Gary and Stephen were busy touring the nursing home and high-fiving over the cheap room rates, I was in Mr. Sterling's mahogany-paneled office. "They want to invoke the old power of attorney," I explained. "They want to claim she's incapacitated, dump her in a facility, and liquidate." Mr. Sterling tented his fingers. "The POA requires 2 signatures to authorize a sale, yes? But they have 2. You are the minority." "However," I said, pulling out the documents Mom and I had been working on for the last 5 years, documents the brothers never bothered to ask about because they were too busy ignoring us, Mom updated the estate plan when she was fully competent 4 years ago. She created the Patterson Family Trust. Mr. Sterling smiled. "I remember drafting this. It grants you, Brenda, sole trusteeship in the event of her decline.
Exactly, I said. But they don't know that. They think the assets are still in her personal name. They think the old POA is the golden ticket. So, Mr. Sterling leaned forward, his eyes twinkling, what is your play, Brenda? I want to transfer everything, I said, today, right now. I want the house, the stocks, the bonds, the cash, everything moved into the irrevocable subtrust we set up, the one designated for specialized purposes. The charitable remainder trust, Mr. Sterling asked. Yes, and I want to enact the bad boy clause. The bad boy clause was a little piece of legal nastiness Mr. Sterling had included as a joke, but Mom loved it. It essentially stated that any beneficiary who attempts to place Eleanor Patterson in a care facility against the recommendation of her primary physician, who was on my side, would be immediately disinherited. If you move the assets now, Mr. Sterling warned, there will be tax implications, and your brothers will go nuclear. Let them, I said. They're trying to put my mother in a place that smells like bleach and despair just to buy sports cars. Push the button, Mr. Sterling. We spent the next 6 hours signing papers. We moved mountains of money. Electronic transfers zipped through the ether, deeds were recorded. By the time I left his office, Eleanor Patterson technically owned nothing but the clothes on her back and a checking account with about $500 in it. Everything else, the millions, the house, the future, was locked inside the Eleanor Patterson Charitable Trust, with me as the sole controller. Which brings us back to the administrative office at Golden Horizon. I looked up from the clipboard. Gary was smirking. Come on, Bren, stop stalling. Pen to paper, let's get Mom settled. Stephen leaned in. We've already listed the house, by the way. Got a cash offer from a developer. We can close in 2 weeks. That money will help Mom a lot. A developer? I asked, my voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from rage. You're going to tear down the house? Dad built the gazebo in the back with his own hands. It's just wood, Brenda, Gary scoffed. The land is worth more without the rot. Progress. Now sign. I picked up the pen. I let it hover over the line. I can't do this, I whispered. Don't start this drama, Stephen snapped. We have power of attorney. If you don't sign, we'll override you. We're just trying to be nice by including you. No, I said, dropping the pen. It clattered loudly on the desk. I mean, I can't sign this because there's no way to pay for it. Mrs. Gable, the administrator, looked up sharply. Excuse me? Your brothers indicated there were significant assets. There were, I said. Gary laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Don't listen to her. She's emotional. Mom is worth millions. We have the bank statements from last quarter. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket. See? $4.2 million in the brokerage. Check the date, Gary.
I said calmly, it's from 3 months ago, so what? Unless Mom went to Vegas, the money is there. It's not, I said. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a thick binder. I dropped it on the desk with a heavy thud. What is this? Stephen asked, eyeing the binder like it was a bomb. That, I said, is the current financial standing of Eleanor Patterson. As of yesterday afternoon, Mom's personal net worth is approximately $480. The room went silent. The buzzing of the lights seemed to get louder. What the hell are you talking about? Gary's face went from smug to red in 2 seconds. Did you steal it? I'll call the cops right now, you little thief. I didn't steal a dime, I said, leaning back in the uncomfortable plastic chair. I protected it. You see, years ago, when you two were too busy to visit on Thanksgiving, Mom appointed me as the trustee of her estate. She gave me full discretion to manage her assets to ensure her quality of care. So where is the money? Stephen demanded, standing up. Transfer it back. We need to pay the deposit. The money, I said, savoring every syllable, has been legally and irrevocably transferred into the Eleanor Patterson Charitable Trust. Trust? Gary sputtered. What trust? We're the beneficiaries. Not of this one,
I smiled. The trust has a very specific mandate. It is dedicated to two things. First, providing top-tier, in-home medical care for Eleanor Patterson in her own residence until her death. Second, upon her passing, the remainder of the principal is to be donated exclusively to the Feline Rescue and Rehabilitation Network and the State Library Association. Stephen looked like he was going to vomit. Cats? You gave our inheritance to cats? Mom loves cats, I shrugged. She doesn't love ungrateful sons who try to dump her in a 2-star facility. You can't do that, Gary roared, slamming his hand on the desk. Mrs. Gable flinched and reached for her phone, probably to call security. That's fraud. Undue influence. We'll sue you into the ground. Go ahead, I said, my voice ice cold. Mr. Sterling anticipated you might say that. Page 42 of the binder is a copy of the no contest clause. It states that any family member who challenges the validity of the trust is automatically excised from the will entirely. Oh, wait, I forgot. You're already out. Out? Stephen whispered. The bad boy clause, I explained. By bringing Mom here, by attempting to admit her against the advice of Dr. Evans, you triggered a disinheritance event. Even if there was money left in the personal estate, which there isn't, you wouldn't get a cent. Gary lunged across the desk. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him. He stopped inches from my face, his breathing heavy, his eyes wild with the realization that the boat, the deaths, the easy life, it was all gone. You witch, he spat. You planned this. I did, I admitted. Mom and I planned it. She knew you'd come for the money eventually. She just hoped she'd be wrong. She cried when I told her you booked the tour here, Gary. She cried. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I looked at Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, I apologize for wasting your time. My mother will not be admitting to Golden Horizon. She will be returning to her home, where a team of private nurses, paid for by the trust, will be waiting for her. Good day. I picked up the binder and walked out. The meltdown in the hallway was legendary. As I walked to the elevator, I could hear Gary screaming at Stephen for convincing him to buy a jet ski on credit. I heard Stephen screaming at Gary for alienating Mom years ago. I heard Mrs. Gable yelling for them to leave the premises before she called the police. I got in my car, my hands shaking just a little, and drove back to the Victorian house. The aftermath was exactly as messy as you'd expect, but not in the way they hoped. They tried to sue. Oh, Lord, did they try. They hired a slimy lawyer who worked on contingency. They filed a suit claiming I had manipulated a mentally incompetent woman. But Mr. Sterling was ready. We had video depositions of Mom from 4 years ago, lucid and sharp, explaining exactly what she wanted to happen if her sons tried to pull a fast one. We had the doctor's notes. We had the emails from Gary and Stephen discussing how quickly they could sell the house. The judge threw the case out in summary judgment. He even lectured their lawyer for bringing such a frivolous suit. Because they had counted their chickens before they hatched, the financial blowback for my brothers was catastrophic. Gary had leveraged his house to invest in a franchise, banking on the inheritance to pay off the note. When the money didn't come, he defaulted. His wife, Linda, left him 3 months later when the repo man took her Range Rover. He's currently living in a studio apartment, working as a shift manager at an auto parts store. Stephen fared even worse. He had been borrowing money from some unsavory characters to fund his image as a high-roller real estate agent. When the big payday evaporated, those characters came collecting. He had to declare bankruptcy. He lost his license for commingling client funds. Desperation makes people do stupid things. Last I heard, he moved 2 states away to live with his in-laws who hate him. As for Mom,
She lived for another 2 years, and they were good years. Because of the trust, we could afford the best. She had 24/7 care in her own bedroom, surrounded by her familiar things. She had a chef who made her soft foods that actually tasted good. She had a music therapist come in twice a week. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in the house her husband built, listening to the rain on the roof. I held her hand as she went. She didn't ask for Gary or Stephen. She just squeezed my fingers and said, "You're a good girl, Brenda." The funeral was small. Gary and Stephen showed up, looking haggard and beaten. They stood at the back, wearing ill-fitting suits, eyeing the floral arrangements as if calculating their resale value. They tried to talk to me afterward by the gravesite. "Brenda," Stephen started, his voice cracking, "look, we've had a rough time. Mom wouldn't want us to suffer. Is there any way the trust has a provision for family hardship?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the greed that had consumed his entire life, the hollowness where a brother should be. "The trust is very specific, Stephen," I said, putting on my sunglasses to hide the fact that I wasn't crying for them. I was done crying for them. "It's for charity. The money is currently building a new wing at the animal shelter. They're naming it the Eleanor Patterson Cat Sanctuary." "But we're family," Gary shouted, his old aggression flaring up but lacking its former fire. "We were," I said, "but you dumped family for cash. You just bet on the wrong horse." I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I still live in the guest house. The main house was turned over to the trust, which rents it out to a nice family to generate income for the charities. I manage the portfolio as a job now. I make a decent salary as the trustee. Mom made sure of that. It's not millions, but it's enough. Sometimes I drive by the animal shelter and see the construction crew working on the new wing. I see the sign with Mom's name on it, and I smile. My brothers wanted a payday. They wanted to strip our mother of her dignity and her legacy for a quick buck. They thought they were the wolves, and we were the sheep. But they forgot one thing. The wolf may have the teeth, but the shepherd has the gun. And in this family, Mom was the shepherd, and she taught me how to shoot. So, to my brothers, if you're reading this on some public library computer because you sold your laptops for rent money, the nursing home you picked for Mom had a vacancy last I checked. Maybe you should book a room. I hear the cabbage soup is to die for.